Have you ever noticed that the $10 that used to buy you a full lunch now barely covers a coffee? It's not your imagination. The price of everything from groceries to gasoline seems to be on a relentless upward climb. This invisible force is called inflation, and it quietly eats away at the value of your money. It's a fundamental feature of almost every modern economy, a constant hum in the background of our financial lives. But sometimes that hum turns into a roar, making the future feel uncertain. So what is this engine that makes everything more expensive, and can we ever turn it off? In simple terms, inflation means your money loses purchasing power over time. $1 today buys you more than $1 will next year. Imagine a cookie cost $1 in 1990. Today, that same dollar might only buy you a small bite of that cookie. The cookie didn't change, but the value of the dollar did. This happens because the general level of prices for goods and services in an economy is rising. It's not just one thing getting more expensive, but almost everything on average. This is measured by something called the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which tracks the average price of a basket of common household goods. When the CPI goes up by 3%, it means you need 3% more money to maintain the same standard of living as the year before. Your piggy bank isn't leaking. The value of what's inside is simply shrinking. The value of what's inside is simply shrinking. So where does inflation come from? Economists generally point to two main drivers. The first is demand, pull inflation. This happens when there's too much money chasing too few goods. Imagine a hot new video game is released, but the factory can only make 1,000 copies. If 1 million people want one and have the money to buy it, sellers can raise the price dramatically. The demand is pulling the prices up. The second driver is cost, push inflation. This occurs when it becomes more expensive to produce goods and services. For example, if a natural disaster makes key resources like oil or lumber scarce, the cost to make and transport everything from plastic toys to furniture goes up. Companies then pass these higher costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. It's not that we want to pay more, it's that the cost of existence for businesses has increased. Another major factor is the money supply itself, controlled by a country's central bank. When a government needs to pay for things like infrastructure projects or social programs and doesn't have enough tax revenue, it can, in a way, create new money. This process is complex, often involving the buying of government bonds, but the end result is more currency flowing into the economy. If the amount of goods and services, the stuff we can actually buy, doesn't grow at the same pace, then each individual dollar becomes less valuable. It's like adding water to a pot of soup to feed more people. The total amount of soup increases, but each spoonful is less flavorful and nourishing. A rapid increase in the money supply without a corresponding increase in economic output is a classic recipe for high inflation. The value is diluted. Inflation can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy through our expectations. If everyone expects prices to rise by 5% next year, workers will demand at least a 5% raise just to keep up. In response, businesses, now facing higher labor costs, will raise their prices by, you guessed it, about 5%. This creates a dangerous feedback loop called a wage price spiral. Expectations of future inflation directly cause that inflation to happen. It's a psychological game as much as an economic one. People also rush to buy big-ticket items now before they get even more expensive, which further increases demand and pushes prices up even faster. Once this cycle gets going, it can be very difficult to stop without causing economic pain. It's like everyone is running faster and faster on a treadmill, but nobody is actually moving forward. They are just trying to avoid falling behind. This all sounds pretty bad, so why don't governments aim for zero inflation? The surprising answer is that a little bit of inflation is actually considered healthy for an economy. Most central banks, like the US Federal Reserve, target an inflation rate of around 2% per year. Why? It encourages spending and investment. If you know your money will be worth slightly less in the future, you have an incentive to use it now, to buy a car, invest in a business, or put it in a savings account where it can earn interest. This keeps the economic engine humming. The alternative, deflation, where prices fall, is far more dangerous. If prices are dropping, nobody spends money because why buy today what will be cheaper tomorrow? This can grind an economy to a complete halt. So, a little, predictable inflation acts as grease for the wheels of commerce, preventing us from hoarding cash under our mattresses. But what happens when that gentle hum becomes a deafening roar? This is hyperinflation, a catastrophic scenario where inflation spirals completely out of control. We're not talking 5 or 10% a year, but often over 50% a month. In Weimar Germany in the early 1920s, prices doubled every few days. People famously had to carry cash in wheelbarrows just to buy a loaf of bread. More recently, in Zimbabwe in 2008, the inflation rate reached an estimated 89.7 sextillion%. At this point, money becomes effectively worthless. People's life savings are wiped out overnight. The entire economic system breaks down as nobody trusts the currency and society reverts to bartering. Hyperinflation is a devastating economic disease that tears apart the fabric of a country, showing what happens when confidence in the value of money is completely lost. It's the inflation engine exploding. So, how do you stop an overheating inflation engine without crashing the entire car? The primary tool used by central banks is adjusting interest rates. In simple terms, interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. When inflation is high, central banks raise interest rates. This makes it more expensive for people to get loans for houses and for businesses to borrow for expansion. This cools down spending across the entire economy, reducing demand and giving supply a chance to catch up, which helps bring prices back under control. It's like gently applying the brakes. But there's a problem. It's a delicate balancing act. If they raise rates too high or too fast, they can slow the economy so much that it triggers a recession and people lose their jobs. Taming inflation is one of the most difficult and important jobs in the modern world, requiring a careful hand to keep the economic engine running smoothly without overheating or stalling out.